Anyone like to kick off the question time? Maybe at the front.
I have like 3 questions. Should I add them all or not?
Yes, please. Do the whole one. So if you could please just briefly say name and organisation, that would be great as well. Thank you.
I'm Florian Ortega. I'm working for Urbanism, architectural practice. So I have a question for Shane and for Steve. So starting with Steve, I was a member of the growing communities too, and I think it was delicious, but maybe like too expensive, I would say. And I was wondering like when the low-income communities in different neighborhoods and then could have access to it, And I was wondering the attitude of the state toward this type of initiative with growing communities or other NGO or other initiative like this, or trying to get subsidies or dotation from the state. I know I'm French. I know like part of the agriculture sector get lots of funding through the EU. I don't know it's towards like organic food that we get a lot. So I'm just wondering if they're trying to get like help from the state.
Yeah, I wish. I don't know what communities, so I don't know anything about them. But I think that they largely funded in terms of public sales and training and obviously they don't have any subsidies for that. I think there's less support for less shape of that's more of this, but there's not that many subsidies for the country to create communities and their food production, which is quite difficult because there was a visa will make it much easier for them to provide their buses at low prices, especially for low-income families. And organically, they've got another organic book scheme based on the Lee Valley. They have sort of 2-tier system, and they have some of their boxes that are specifically directed towards low-income families. And that's one of the ways that they get around that, to provide that fair share, production values.
Yes, a lot of what we do actually is with low-income groups. I'm focused today on architecture in the city, but I think one of the real great myths about quality food and food in general is the cost of the money we put. It can cost a small fortune really well, but it need to. We run lots and lots of projects as an organisation, going out into the community and really starting at shopping. And how to shop, where to shop, what there is to buy at that time. And I think even things like box schemes and so forth are really driven by what you, the consumer, wants. So we hear lots of we hear lots of words like seasonal and other words. They sound a bit like buzzwords, but actually really do depress the value of your shopping basket. If you're able to do that, then that really will bring down the costs. And also thinking about how you can work at the edges. One of the things that we do is we talk about meat cooking. I'm sorry for vegetarians here, but if you were to buy a kilo of quality pork in a butcher's, it will cost you about £12 a kilo. And a shoulder moves a lot, there's a little work on that. But pig cheeks cost about £1.50 a kilo. And if you think about a pig's cheek and a shoulder, it's like the same amount of work. Pigs are always walking around and they're always chewing. So the texture of a pig cheek when you roast it is identical. But I would challenge you, if I cooked you a piece of pig cheek and a piece of pork shoulder, that you wouldn't actually be able to tell you what the difference is. So I think one of the things we have about eating well, you either have to have either a little bit of knowledge or a little bit of thought, or you spend a little bit of extra money, and you can go to Waitrose, you can go to farmers markets, or you can buy whatever it is that you want. It can be produced really well, that will cost you more, or it's a little bit more thought and maybe a little bit more time in your prep, and you can eat really, really well, and you can eat levels everywhere.
Yeah, and Shane also touched upon the amount of our income that's spent at the moment on food, like price and I think it's gone down to about 40% of our income, about 50%.
We're at 11.6% of our income. The absolute lowest we got was 10.9. So when we say, well, we've had this global crisis, we're spending more money on food, the price of oil and the price of inputs and things like fertiliser things have gone up. They have put the price of food up slightly, 0.5%.
Also, I think is a proportion of income because people are spending so much more money on housing.
This is after housing costs I'm talking about. What it actually is, and I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, is that we all now have a mobile phone. Most of us will go on holiday every year, maybe we'll go away twice a year. Not so much in cities, but certainly outside of cities. In the 1970s, it was unusual to have one car. Now, if there's two adults in the household, it would be unusual often to each have a car. London's slightly different, we don't have the same kind of car ownership. And the fact is that we're spending our money on other things. And I'm not here telling you what you should spend your money on, but it is a myth to say that we don't actually have income to spend on things about priorities. Do we spend money on the book tonight? I certainly going to. Do we not spend money on the book tonight? We make these choices, and we make those choices in food. Do I go to Waitrose and pay a really hefty premium because they've taken the breast off the carcass? Or do I go to my butcher and have an even higher welfare bird, get the breast off the carcass, I'll pay an extra £2 for it, but I've got the legs, the wings, the meat underneath it, and that's going to feed me for 3 days, whereas if I buy the 2 breasts, it's going to feed me just for tonight. It's where we choose to spend our money, and I'm certainly not here telling you how to spend it, but if we think we don't have it, then perhaps we're slightly misguiding ourselves.
I just wanted to add to that briefly in terms of the way you're getting the vegetable aspect. What I talked about the supermarkets, when they have these high levels of wastage, that's not for free. We pay for that. They factor in the cost of that wastage and they add that into the price. So we need to try and supermarkets and change the way we do business, and we change that by voting that fee. There's some really interesting initiatives taking place in some countries. One of them that's really grabbed attention recently in France. There's the largest supermarket in France, Intermarché, has launched a campaign where they'll sell the warm fruit and veg, the warm carrots, the veg, whatever they call it, 30% cheaper than the ordinary veg. So it makes it more accessible. And it's not, you can be cynical and say it's more people store, maybe it is, but at the same time, they're reducing food waste, they're making good, nutritious fruit and vegetables available to people who might otherwise be able to afford it. So it's things like that, it's putting pressure on our own supermarkets to follow suit. Don't trim those green beans. I don't need them in a box. I don't need them all be the same size. I'm paying for that wastage. I'd rather pay less and have bigger beans, thanks. Double win.
Thank you very much for that full panel. You said you have a few more questions. Do you mind if we come back to you? Let someone else ask the question first. Thank you. Lady on the left.
I just had a question for Dan. It seems like a lot of the projects that Feedback is doing are really grassroots oriented. They're really kind of from the bottom up projects, which I think in the day and age that we're in, that's where a lot of mobilization to change is coming from, which is based on volunteers and small community efforts. But I'm wondering if any fraction of your efforts or groups that you work in partnership with are actually trying to go maybe more from the top down in terms of trying to get any sort of legislation around initiatives that tax companies that are going to waste, or doing something like that where it's put into law, because even though these projects are really meaningful and they're what we have access to, they're slow runners and they take a lot of time, whereas when something's put into legislation, it's obviously a lot quicker when it involves tax.
That's a fantastic question, and it feeds in all of the projects that we do. All the projects we do are, designed to do things like tackle food waste and farms. That's actually their secondary function. Their primary function is to raise awareness. So campaigns like Feeding the 5,000, it's to just build momentum until we get talked about. So they talked about regionally, then they talked about nationally, and then they talked about internationally. So one of the Feeding the 5,000 we did was in Brussels. It's a great place to do with the European Parliament, and members of the MEPs did come along. And change does, you're right, take a lot of time, but that's what we're working towards. One really powerful example of change that has already taken place is the Groceries Code Adjudicator, who's been put into effect in the UK since 2011, has now real power to effectively discipline the supermarkets. They can charge supermarkets 1% of their turnover, which is huge, for acting unfairly towards their suppliers. So the green bean that shows you, there's huge examples of where supermarkets are treating their particular overseas suppliers and come to Africa just have less representation, less power. The Groceries Code Adjudicator can now act on behalf of them and challenge the supermarkets. whether it actually works or not. I mean, the legislation now exists. The ball is in the court of that person, and the ball is also in the court of everyone involved in food production to raise the flag. It's not easy because of, even though the code grants anonymity to people who, if you're, there are only so many green bean farms in Kenya who supply Sainsbury's. So if you flag up to the gross code of Duke, Sainsbury's kind of, really treat them unfairly, So there is some work out in the detail, but I guess the point is that the change has happened, and we've demonstrated that by the campaigns we do, not just us, there's loads and loads of organisations doing fantastic work, but you can get there, you can get the EU to listen, you can get the UN to listen, you can get national governments to listen.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from the audience?
Thanks for talking. My name is Patrick from the University of Washington Architecture. Is there a physical architecture that can respond to food waste? Currently it's skipping behind we're getting caught, getting presented with caught by police. Is there anything that could work that it's kind of like a transgression against the economic model of shopping and being a consumer? And as consumers we're pretty much blind to all these costs, even clothes, you don't know where it's being made, who's making it. Is there any kind of physical things that you can do? Obviously, consider everything like that, but particularly food waste, social, how networks. That's research that I'm interested in pursuing some of and thoughts.
This is for Jan or Leon. Would you like to take the question?
Just to understand, but is it about, because you started by talking about physical architecture, about how that might respond to the problem. I'm just wondering if you can clarify, I don't know who's best to. Could you just possibly rephrase the question?
Well, Bristol's Kitchen in Bristol, a similar project to the skips food, it's a cafe, people go there. I think it's been packed every day, but showing how that model could scale up, or any thoughts on how formal architecture could respond to the informal situation that's happening, occurring around without being a crime. That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is that's a really good example. Bristol's a great city, a very green city. There's an initiative at the moment in Leeds called the Real Junk Food Project.
That's where I met that.
Yeah, fantastic. So that model that they've got called the Pay-as-you-feel cafe, so people go in, they eat a great meal that's made from waste food entirely, and it starts with people literally skip diving. And it still does, people now replicate that around the country, and as you say, very rightly, it's an unofficial model which could quite easily be made official. So granting premises, and we're just going to talk about what architecture do to respond. There perhaps needs to be a legislation change around, there is already organisations like Fair Share that get surplus food from the supermarkets and take it to these charities. But the Real Junk Food Project, you're right, could scale up very, very quickly given a bit of help and support and legislation. I think going back to the source of the food and why there's a problem, there's a very interesting debate taking place at the moment about, there's a couple of guys in France at the moment who are currently facing prosecution for skip diving. The supermarkets are trying to prosecute them, saying you've taken our food, you've stolen our food. And of course the legal position as far as we're aware, because we've been through this in the UK, is that's not your food anymore. You threw it away, you didn't want it. Yeah? So we should have access to it. And I think what needs to happen is, if they haven't put food in the skip, the legislation would say, yes, that food is no longer yours, and we have an infrastructure which takes it, then and there, it's backed up clearly wherever it goes to these cafes. It's very easy to achieve, it's a political will, or more correctly, the business or the commercial or the supermarkets isn't there to allow it to happen. What they're afraid of is that if they give this food away, and someone else effectively sells it, they give it away for free or a pay-as-you-feel model, they feel they're cannibalising their market. If you can go and eat green beans that they threw away, you won't go and buy the green beans from the store for £1.75. So that's what needs to change from a legislation point of view. But if you guys are for on the architecture, because at the moment, I guess, the cafes that you're talking about, again, getting premises is quite difficult, and they tend to be down back streets where real estate isn't of high value, so you have to go and find them out. It would be really nice, wouldn't it, if on Broadway Market there was a beautiful building that served waste food. I don't know if, again, if that's realistic.
Yeah, from my experiences in food kitchen, we've sort of identified 4 things that you need in order to start one of the spaces, which are food, which there's plenty of waste food that's available, equipment which you can use it quite easily, people, which there's lots of people that are willing to contribute their time to meet other people and enjoy developing their cooking skills and getting together. And last one is a space, which is probably the hardest thing to find. There are lots of spaces that are out there that are also sort of being wasted because they haven't been used in some respects. And so identifying those spaces and putting them into use, I think, is an interesting challenge for architecture. I think that the purpose of the laws is quite playfully playing around with the concept of waste as well. Yeah.
For example, I think we have to take it on many levels to change that. First is that we have to change our mindset about what is passed out by data. I think that Dan has mentioned it earlier on, several of us have talked about it. I think we also have to change the whole we have to empower ourselves to then influence the supermarkets. If they want to throw away food, we can have it for free. Otherwise, they'll take away all half the beans and sell this to us for double the price. And then I think we have to change the local authority, the planning councils, to say, why can't we celebrate sort of this thing rather than saying it's food waste and we're going to sell it in some back alley? No, we can actually make it into, the examples of these pop-up installations and places. I mean, that guy was making food on the car bonnet in my village, and he runs a very successful business. I mean, he didn't have a proper kitchen. But I think we need to see the kind of the fun aspect, positive aspects of this together with policies. Then we can actually create positive spaces out of it. And I think what we need is a positive branding to actually consume these things. And we should also change legislation that people can actually take them away. I think it's really trusty to destroy them, to bin them.
I think one of the things that we can certainly do is, as much as having a commitment to social housing, there should be social space, community space. We don't have community centres anymore. Our public land is increasingly being built, I touched on that earlier, in the centre of Marylebone, where there's the largest farmers market in central London, is having a battle at the moment whether that's going to remain there or not, because they're going to be building up there. And the councils undecided whether the market's going to stay there or not. I think with the idea of supermarkets, if we can, it's very easy to say shop there less, but if we're able to have spaces where we can connect directly with the person who's producing it, then actually already you're taking away food waste. Go to the farmer's market, and I know it's a trendy thing to say, but go to the farmer's market, you're not going to find beans with the ends chopped off. Waitrose, who were selling Woolley tomatoes this year, and not Waitrose Fashion, are actually one of the better supermarkets, but Waitrose made a big play about selling Woolley tomatoes which had blemishes and things on. There was a huge amount of publicity for them. They were charging 1.5 times the regular tomatoes. Who's going to buy them? Well, it goes back to your earlier question, who can afford that? Well, actually, we're now saying that eating food waste is in the realm of those with higher incomes. Crazy. Food should be democratic, so I think if we can have democratic public space, then that would be something. I think other smaller things that we can do, and these are about, again, the value of our land, is that if we look at our kitchens and new build housing, and many of you will be designing these things or doing them in the future, we're making kitchens smaller and smaller. We often don't even have things like deep freezers and things in them. I know it sounds like a wacky thing, but as soon as you have a deep freezer, you have a way of removing food waste, or a potential way of removing food waste at home. If we have gardens, then make sure there's always a compost heap outside. It sounds really silly, but again, what we're doing is we're recycling that food through. There is always going to be tiny amounts of food waste. If you're buying a cabbage or a cauliflower, there's always going to be some batter leaking outside. Not even I eat those. Lettuce does something too. We don't have rabbits and things at home either. Maybe you're hunting that, but
I agree with everything you say, but the things that I do not approve of deep freezers, because my mother has this deep freezer. She's so stocked up, she could feed more than 5,000. Absolutely. I think that also the other thing, food waste is not just about that's consuming. If it goes beyond edible, like the lettuce that you will chuck away, I really think that we could think about anaerobic digesters in a large scale. One of of my diagrams, I actually showed the river Thames being this deposit where you can actually, there's future in rail food waste, to make gases and fertilizers and so forth.
Yes, to add, I think, you mentioned food waste. Do you know about that?
Yes, yeah. So just finish it, yeah, there is, I think, Tristram out of the Farm Organisation designed food waste pyramid. The idea being that, yes, anaerobic digestion, the worst thing you can do with food is put to landfill, not just because it's a terrible waste of food, but because of the kind of carbon emissions and the methane that causes. Next above that is anaerobic digestion, so it is a good solution. It's much preferable to landfill. But even better than that is to give it to livestock, again, because that prevents the need to grow this food fresh in the animal, cut down the animal to grow soy and maize for pigs, feed them on the waste we have instead. But of course, above all of that is getting to human consumption. So it's kind of that pyramid, if you can't do the best thing, do the next thing down. And really, there should be, with anaerobic digestion in that mix, there should very rarely be an excuse for food to go into landfill.
Thank you very much. The lady on your right, to my left here. If you could please say who you're directing the question to, and I have the panel as well. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Natalie and I run a community food growing space in East London. I have two questions. The first one is about, from my experience with food growing in the city, as soon as people start to engage with food growing themselves, it's instantly you have an understanding of how hard it is to grow food, and you have a different relationship to appreciating good food, and you're much less likely to waste food when you know the effort it's been through. So in terms of creating more food growing spaces, how can you do that in the sense of looking at sort of green wild space in the city, so things like the skip garden that competes across, or land that's going to be developed in the future? How can we, I don't know whether it's through policy or through better design and some of the practices, how can we open up more space for food growing? And then the second question is about trying to build this sort of notion of London food and more locally sourced food, and like you were saying with growing communities, and there's a lot of problem with, say, getting an organic certification in terms of cost. So if you're a small project, there's no way you can afford to go through and the time it takes to get certified. And I think that a lot of the causes for certification are for projects where you can't see where the food's being made, you don't know, so you need that kind of that regulatory body in a place like London where there is this possibility for people to see where that food is coming from. How can we, whether we develop a new certification method or something a bit different that fits with the producers, especially when even organic now is in thinking more progressive things that you're talking about permaculture and more agroecological methods. How can we change that and find something that's more suitable for London and small local producers?
Thank you. First question about space and growing food. You want to take that?
I think our local authorities should release more of the spaces out. I mean, for example, the trading companies should also release a lot of their embankments of spaces out to communities. That's what they do in a lot of African states. In Africa, for example, we use embankments of rivers, edges of railway lines, and spaces like that for free community growing, and that will improve their income as well. So it's not just a hobby or a source of income, but it's actually a source of employment for them, and that's very important. However, I don't want to be a prophet of doom either. On the other side, I've also been informed that this sort of land sometimes is unsafe for growing food for consumption. We have to be very careful about the history of that plot of land, because it is contaminated on industrial sites and so forth. When we grow food, the food that we consume contains all the bad stuff inside from the land itself. And I think we need to be careful. So the things that in America, for example, in Newark, which is one of the most malnutrition cities in New York State, they have this scheme called the Brick City Farm. And what they do is that they actually clean up a lot of sort of disused backyards, public spaces, places where they have a lot of drug dealings and all sorts of crimes, And communities actually become the guardian of these spaces, you know. And I'm sure we have quite a bit of these spaces around our cities, and if local authorities could grant us free lease or temporary lease on them. And in Brick City Farm, what they do is that they actually do not grow, they don't even damage the soil itself. They actually bring these what they call soil boxes, these polycyanid soil boxes, so they know the source of the soil itself that the plant is growing from, and they just have rows and rows of them, which means that you know that the lettuce that you're going to eat or the cabbage is going to be safe, and the landowners lease it out, knowing that you don't even damage the ground, you know, and all that you do is to look after that piece of land for them, and you know, and in a way maybe we have policy like that Woolley, inverted brackets, landowners to release some of this land to communities. I think that would be a very good thing, and I think this, you know, more of us should actually champion that with local authorities at least.
It used to be a lot better, actually, without straying too much in politics. Local authorities just don't have the staff that support these things. So we have over 100 community gardens, largely in schools in other areas, but they're actually concentrated in South London, specifically the South London growing community, which was local authority land, so the Southern Lambeth and Lewisham, they got together, and that is why we have a lot of gardens and things there. The difficulty I think we now have is actually trying to find land and finding spaces, and it's actually harder to do that than actually organisations who will go out and do it. We certainly offer bursaries and so forth, and we have the longest open period to actually give those grants away. We give it cash away, and it's like, please take my money. There aren't that many strings attached to it, and it actually took us some time this year to actually get people to come along and do that. So I think local authorities certainly are key there. The gardens are public land, but there are so few people in the local authority anymore after what's been going in the wider sense that actually it's not a priority for them anymore. They've got lots of other priorities and answering the phone to people like me and other people in the panel here is that they just don't want to hear us because they've got other things to do. So I think that's really interesting. In terms of connecting people, I absolutely totally agree with you. I think people connected to food is absolutely key. We run a project with some of the community company called Golden Co. And some of you may have heard of Golden Co. They're out in Hackney, and they take kids at risk of crime or have committed crime to beekeep. And they go before the magistrates, and it's generally boys, because boys commit more crime than girls. And the boys go before the magistrates, and the magistrate says, you know, you can either go along to Feltham or you can go and see these guys at Slow Food and beekeep. And of course the boys will say, let's go and do some beekeeping. And of course these kids, I wish they didn't, these kids have seen knives, guns and everything else and are not scared of anything, and they see bees for the first time and are actually terrified because bees sting them and don't care if they're carrying a knife in their back pocket. And at the end of the year we've taught these kids who, you know, people do things because their circumstances and other things are going in their lives. I'm not excusing antisocial behaviour, but they react in a certain way. That project is funded at a time for those young people, and the young people at the end of that year wanted to stay on, and we can't keep them on it. Very briefly on certification, I absolutely agree with you. We say that Slow Food is the certification which meets those values. We don't talk about it organic. You're absolutely right. The Soil Association charge about £2,000 just to walk in. If you're producing really, really small amounts of food, you're just not going to do that. You see an organic label, it's a good thing, we support that, but it's expensive. And I think the relationship with fair trade is no one here for fair trade. I'm sorry, I'm getting really political about fair trade. Fair trade only really makes the difference to fairly large organisations, and fair trade interestingly depresses the price on quality, very small scale artisan goods. You may say, well, how can it possibly do that? Fair trade is actually about getting a better price. Well, it does give a better price, but there's no guaranteed better price. But then you get really great businesses here and overseas who are looking for ethical alternatives and say, fair trade, I know what that is, I'm going to stop that. Then you've got these other really small producers doing really great things. They're not included. And because the people who are paying a greater price are taking their trade away, the value of their other crop, if you want, is depressed. So the really, really small people are probably getting less money than they would if fair trade didn't exist. That said, fair trade do a lot of good. I can see that there's some real benefits to communities. They do build schools, they do build hospitals and things, but that benefit is not uniform. Actually, people benefit most of the larger cohorts of larger organisations.
With regard to food growing spaces, I think there's so many potential spaces within the city. Before that, there's lots of architects in the audience that sort of urge to think about food growing and designing spaces or what have you. Types of bus stops are being sort of proposed. There's potential gardens and lots of rooftops out there that might need some sort of structural support. But I think there was one study that sort of looked at whether we could. There was in 2012. Growing spaces by 2012, the Olympics, that got a lot of support from the mayor. I think there is 1,900 new growing spaces between in 4 years before the Olympics and in the lead up to the Olympics. I think we need to be getting together as groups and asking the council, approaching them, saying, demanding more growing spaces for people to be working with. One of the roles we see for the Happy Food Partnership is that it provides enough weight to be able to make that happen. We're basing our charter and our principles on there's quite a few successful, quite established food partnerships around the country. Brighton's been running for about 8 years, I think, and employ 15 people and got a turnover of about $1 million. And they're sort of the first port of call for a lot of people in making those kind of things happen. So it's great that there's some initiatives there that are making those kind of things easier for people.
I just want to add something. Since most of you here are architects or planners here, I think in most of your schemes, if we all do our bit, and also our local authority, where they grant or not planning permission to build buildings or refurbishments like that. They're building now the sort of energy policies and sustainable policies and whatnot to get planning permission. I think we should include within the energy policy and sustainable policy food and water. Because food and water, food is not, when we just talk about food, it's not just food that's going to be an issue when we have 2/3 of the world population living in cities by 2050. But it will also include the scarcity of drinkable water too. And I think that's a real issue. If we build new build and redevelop, we should really include in our design aspects of food sustainability or security, or at least a small fraction of it, and water sustainability. I think that's really important. So on the various sort of planning committees I sit on, we are trying to encourage designers to really bring those issues into give validity to their scheme. Not just sort of saying, oh, I don't have much glass now, we have solar panels on our building. I don't think that's enough. I think councils and authorities should really step up when it comes to planning permission policies.
Thank you very much. We can take another 2, possibly 3 questions. We've got about 15 minutes. Gentleman in the flower shirt.
Roger, from BFE Architecture. All of this urban farming and getting back into contact with the source of food is brilliant, and the community food distribution as well. But they're very people and time intensive. And so at the end of my day, I go home, I have enough time to cook, and then I go to bed and watch TV. I would really like to be part of these schemes and to give my time. But as housing is costing more, yes, we're spending much less on food. I would love to give my time to being part of these schemes. But we're also very time poor as well. And it takes time to track down the right food from the butchers. By the time I get home from work, my local butcher's closed. We're really lucky to have that butcher. But it's closed, Waitrose is open, it's open. So, maybe this is towards Shane. Would you be, if you're a management consultant, would you be willing to give your staff an extra day off if they were to take part in community food distribution, or to farm at home if their garden is big enough or if they have a lot? And to the rest of us, would we be willing to take a hit on our wages that day off, or to readjust our working week?
Can I start then?
Thank you. Very interesting question.
So, to be honest, a very good idea. I previously worked for an organisation that did exactly that. They gave their employees on top of their annual leave 5 days a year off, as long as they contribute their time to a good cause. And the organisation didn't dictate what it was. You can choose yourself, as long as it was a charity or a non-profit, which I think is a fantastic idea. I think every employer in this country and around the world should do the same thing. There's no reason not to. Secondly, in terms of time, I absolutely appreciate. I live in London like probably all of us do. I can't afford to buy a house here. I don't know what the future holds, but I took a decision to go down to working 4 days a week for that very reason. I was sick of having my life dictated to by a kind of working clock. My life's improved immeasurably. I might end up being out of bin eventually, ironically enough, because I can't afford to live anymore. But I doubt that's going to happen. And and we're all afraid of not keeping up with the Joneses. But ultimately, I don't think the Joneses are very happy. And I know that I'm happy, so that's my experience of it.
Really, really interesting questions. We're all here tonight, so actually we are all very busy people. We're doing things, we probably all work very late. But much in the same way we've never spent so little on food, we've never had so much leisure time as a collective body of people. We've never watched so much television. As I intimated, the fastest growing segment in TV's cookery programmes and they're off the television. Even I'm sick of them, and my whole career is built around food. Do I advocate people taking time off? Yes, a lot of the time I spend, I do working with slow food, which I do a couple of days a week, which I do unpaid. I go to businesses and say, do this, have flexible working, think about doing this, can you do other things? You can certainly use things like boxes and drop points and so forth. You can work those around your own day. The veg box people very often drop them outside for you. I appreciate you still need a covered area, and maybe going out to the office, they're not necessarily heaviest things to do. I also think eating at home after a long day. The norm is perhaps to go to the supermarket, get a plastic box, prick it 2 or 3 times, stick it in that metal box, and listen to it ping 3 minutes later. I have an alternative ready meal. It's to go into my fridge, I crack open an egg, which is the same thing. I stick it in my frying pan, and 3 minutes later I've got a ready meal. It's called an omelette. I will throw some decent cheese or something over that. So, what do we want to do? You're probably not going to go home and cook a roast chicken tonight, serve it with sauce and so forth. But I think it's about forward planning, going out there, seeing what will deliver. We'll plug our food maps, go onto our website, we'll tell you what's near to you, those are ways of getting around those things. But I do take what you're saying.
I think the other thing is that, I don't mean to preach here, but I think we should also, when we talk about food and so forth, I really value quality, and I don't mean expensive. I rather eat good quality food where I really enjoy it in smaller quantities. I have to say, I don't belong to any sort of dieting company here. I actually lost 16 kg since January because I started eating sensibly. In a sense that, rather than eating something that makes me comfortable and makes me happy with lots of sugar in it, I actually stop eating a lot of those things and I treat myself to cakes on the weekends only and carbs on the weekends. And I think what I'm trying to say is that we all have very, very busy lives, and I think we need to adjust our lifestyle to suit. And I really believe in going home, rather crack an omelette too. Well, usually I don't crack it on, I make an omelette, I just boil it. I like hot boiled, so. But I actually think that quality of food is more important than mass quantity. And that's why when you go to America, I don't know if any Americans here, you're presented with huge plates of food. And for most of us in Europe, we are rather petite eaters, that we can't even finish it, and then it goes into the bin. You go to buy a sandwich in New York, it feeds at least a family of 5. But I'd rather have a small, delicate sandwich, which is just really great tomatoes, and maybe just a little drizzle of olive oil in there, and I would be happy very happy person. So I'm for quality then.
I also love eggs. But, yeah.
What do you have then?
Excellent.
I suppose, certainly I chose to work in hospitality, so I don't have a lot of time either, although I eat quite well because I run a restaurant. But I would say that it's perhaps we should all be trying to look more towards a 35-hour working week, which should give us more time to enjoy some of the great things in life, like food. What slow food is trying to advocate. I suppose one of the things that we also often waste is time. If you stop wasting as much time and have more time to spend eating great food. But that's what I have to say.
Thank you, very good points. And for the record, I like coach legs.
How many minutes?
I'm not quite sure, just kind of have a look and my neighbour is ready. So we are running out of time. So one question, possibly two. Lady with curly brown hair first, I think, and then possibly second one, the guy in the red jumpsuit this one before you.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I study anthropology of food at SOAS and run a pop-up restaurant. I had a question about the kind of disconnect between conceptual design and practical food spaces. Your food parliament sounds amazing, but not practical in day-to-day life. Same thing with vertical pig farm. Looks great. I used to work for a restaurant where the original design plans had a customer's staircase going through the kitchen. So there seems to be this disconnect between these amazing spaces, but not actually being functional for their purpose. So I wanted to know your thoughts on how we bridge that gap and how do we kind of connect both sides and get people working in the food industry more involved in the designs that affect them.
I completely agree with your feedback there on food parliament. The food parliament is not intended to be built, and it's a provocation. I want you to go back. The intention is that after you've seen this tonight, I want you to go back and tell your flatmate or your partner and say, I went to this discussions tonight, and this professor from UCL suggested some stupid program that has this disconnection between reality and this sort of fictional character that he was talking about. The whole idea is to provoke and for me to encourage sort of the design profession to really think about possibility. It's much more of a metaphor than a real. I think real proposals, I mean, if you're interested, please refer to my earlier book, which is Smart Cities, where we actually literally have to design to a very tight brief for the Chinese government, where they actually, every square meters, every bit of money matters. So that's the difference. So tonight, I'm just here to provoke all of you to really say, actually, that was a stupid scheme, but actually, it got me thinking about a better idea. So you guys are going to do a better idea because of the stupid scheme I've shown you tonight.
Thank you very much for that concise but informative answer. We have time for one more question. I think the gentleman in the red jumper this time.
Hi, I'm Nicholas. I'm a tap planner. I guess I wanted to, I'm not sure whether this is specific to any one member of the panel, so maybe the whole panel. And the common theme about food in cities is wastage. And we waste an awful lot, and if we could cut out the wastage, then we'd be doing a lot better. And I guess the question is it a cultural thing where the general public kind of go, yuck, it's wasted food, it's part of cell life, it's not perfect? Or is it a lack of logistics and systems to put in place? Because obviously fresh food has to be on the plate pretty quickly. And so is it a cultural thing, or do we lack the kind of the kind of the systems in which to get it from the point where it would be wasted to the point where it could be eaten.
It's a good question. The answer is it's entirely down to will. The logistics say, I could go home tonight and place an order with Ricardo, and 8 hours later it'll be at my front door. And that's just one example of many. And the same with farms. If you go down to Herefordshire when they're producing cider, 10 truckloads of apples come every day into the cider factories tipped. And the logistics of this country are kind of second to none. If anything, the problem is we've got empty trucks running up and down the country because the supermarkets want to get food to you too quickly, so they deliver every single day and have empty trucks coming back, so environmentally they're wasting a lot of fuel. In terms of the reasons why food is wasted, it's a bit of a chicken and egg. The supermarkets will tell you that the reason they're not serving you wonky vegetables, or they're serving, or they're not giving you the lettuce that's past its best before days, because that's what you want. Okay, they believe that's our culture, but of course it isn't. It's down to our choice. In other countries, the idea of wasting food is completely like, if you go to Asia, a lot of places in Asia, it's a faux pas. If you leave rice on your plate, it's an insult to your host. We do need to change the way that we look at food, but it's not enough just to say it is a chicken and egg. We've got to tell the supermarkets that's what we want. We've got to start voting with our feet and acting to influence kind of policy and kind of businesses that serve us food. And if you want to add to it.
I think there's a couple of things. One, it is about the lack of skills and awareness, genuine lack of skills and awareness. And some of these things do take very, very small amounts of extra skills to reduce food waste. And a little bit more extra knowledge does make a difference. So you're really doing really well. I think the other thing is, I think the Great British public, and I'm excluding it, the Great British public are in utter denial of what they think is true and the actual reality. So as I was saying, we spend less on food when the public thinks food's really expensive. The public think that they don't have time to go shopping, but they never have so much time. The public think that food is really difficult to prepare and cook. Well, that's not changed either. If anything, because the equipment we have in our homes is actually faster. I'm not talking about those awful microwaves, I'm talking about just general bits of kit. So we say this all the time, and like anything that we constantly repeat, we actually then make it true. So even though it's everything I've said, as I say, those ideas are utter nonsense, we believe them. And you can go into groups of people, even into professional kitchens, which is something I do, something you'll do. And actually, even with the professional kitchens, have those same misnomers, and they'll think that actually it takes a lot of time to do that. I do a lot of work with very large caterers and very large restaurant groups, trying to get them to be more sustainable. They'll say to me, but it costs more, or it takes extra time, and you've got those things there. So it's right the way through. And actually, I think if we can all try for a day to actually go and just do it, then we'll see that actually that didn't take a great deal of time. Actually, we do have time. In fact, it saved me some time, it saved me some money, and hey, it was fun too. And if it wasn't fun for you to get the flatmaker bar or someone else to do it, but it's not as difficult as we think it is, and actually a lot of the issues we're talking about is up here.
I think on a more individual level, food waste is a generational thing. And for my grandmother and my mother, that was very little waste, because for them who have been through the war, every little bit counts. And the thing is that it's really interesting, because sometimes I am a true culprit here. I would say, it's been there for many days, we'll just chuck it away. And my mother would be absolutely full, and she would say, Granny would never ever do this. When we were rationing, we had, during the war, she was in a different war to your grandmother's, I guess. But the thing is that during wartime, they have a different mindset, and because of that, they have grown older and probably wiser on that level, that food cannot be wasted, and that's it. And I guess because for us, especially in the West, where there's so much accessibility to go back to, and affordability for most of us in this room, and many others outside tonight and on the streets, we just say, okay, it looks a bit manky, we'll just chuck it away, rather than saying, okay, that will go into making stock, or they'll go into making, something else that into the stew that doesn't have to look perfectly green or yellow or in color. And I think the culture needs to change. For me, I think because when I talk to my two great ladies back home, they have a different attitude to myself.
Yeah, I think with food waste, there's a multitude of different reasons why food waste exists in society. Both the reasons you just mentioned. I think when I'm looking for chefs at a restaurant, if you can find a chef that can work really creatively with food waste and create, or can potentially become food waste and transform that waste and turn it into treasures with that alchemy processes where that's what we really value in the chef in some respects. There's someone that's very ethical with their ordering, someone who's able to sort of deal with the logistics side of things to make sure that you're making the most out of the food that you purchase. And I think that, like Sujay was saying, there's lots of examples in society of when things are harder, for instance, the war, or otherwise one thing pop up when there was the siege of Sarajevo. There's no food going in and out of the city. It was very, very difficult to they became very creative. There's a really interesting cookbook that's created that used either forage food from local environment or just waste food in very creative ways. And I think that waste can actually lead to a lot of creativity in the food can be quite interesting. My dad used to create all sorts of really horrible dishes and what was left over in the fridge. Working with the people's kitchen, sometimes we face whatever vegetables we pick up. And that leads to a really interesting creative process and new dishes being created from that. I think that the more projects like that does taking place, the more awareness we have towards food waste, the more people sort of feel comfortable with that as a concept. I think food waste is sometimes a bit of a difficult word, so sometimes we prefer to use food surplus. So it hasn't really become waste yet, but still the potential to be something quite incredible on someone's plate. We can move forward with that and deal with more issues.
Thank you very much. To add to your creativity with your father, I think I once was served up fried porridge from the night before as a child. It was quite a low point to my father's creativity. No, I ate it. So thank you. We've had some good discussions about how to work together with food and cities, and you can see here so that 2/3 of the world population will live in cities by 2050. So it's definitely an important issue to figure out what we're going to do with food in a sustainable way. It's quite amazing to see the beehives and the opera houses, and quite shocking to see how much food is actually wasted. So I'm sure you all have a lot more questions to ask our panel or between each other. We have some lovely food and some drinks at the back. Please make sure we finish all the food. No food waste.